How many times have you lost control? Not because someone hurt you, but because you let a moment hijack your mind. You felt the tension rising, the words forming, the need to defend, to strike, to make it stop. And before you could catch yourself, you reacted fast, hard, loud, not because you wanted to, but because you didn't know how not to. And afterward, when the dust settled, you didn't feel strong. You felt exposed, drained, disconnected from the man you're trying to become. We all have those moments, when we wish we had said less, when we wish we had paused, when we wish we had been the one who stayed calm, while the other person unraveled. And the truth is, those who master their emotions are not emotionless. They simply refuse to be ruled. Because control is not the absence of feeling, it's the presence of choice. This video is for the man who's tired of being triggered, tired of being thrown off center, tired of losing himself in the heat of a moment he later regrets. You'll learn 8 Stoic principles that don't just sound wise. They work. Practical tools to create space before the spiral, to reclaim your reactions, to lead from stillness, and to hold the line even when others try to pull you into chaos. And if this speaks to something in you, drop one word in the comments below that describes the emotion you're learning to control. Someone out there might need that word more than you think. Now, let's begin. This is the power of not reacting. Principio 1. Create the pause. Here's the hard truth most people refuse to accept. Your biggest regrets didn't come from what happened to you. They came from what you did next. That text you sent in anger. That look you couldn't hide. That sentence you wish you could swallow back. And in the wreckage that follows, it's never the trigger that ruins your life. It's your inability to pause before pulling the emotional trigger. Eliot Crane used to be that man. At 38, he was sharp, driven, respected. But in one boardroom meeting, a single offhand remark from an investor sent him spiraling. His face flushed, his voice raised. He defended, he lectured, he reacted. And in trying to prove he was in control, he proved the opposite. The funding disappeared. His team lost faith. His reputation cracked. But what broke him wasn't the insult. It was the fact that he had no space between stimulus and response. No pause, no filter, no mastery. Just emotion, untempered, leaking out like steam from a cracked engine. The Stoics knew this truth centuries ago. Seneca wrote, "Delay is the remedy for anger, that tiny sliver of time between what happens and what we do next. That's where our power lives. That pause is your throne, and if you fail to sit on it, someone else will rule you. Your ego, your fear, your past. The world will always give you something to react to. Disrespect, disappointment, disruption. But your strength isn't measured by how fast you strike back. It's measured by how still you can stay. In the silence where most people explode, the man who pauses commands the room, not because he dominates it, but because he refuses to be dominated by it. This isn't about suppression. It's not about pretending you feel nothing. It's about building a reflex where awareness steps in before impulse takes over, where a breath becomes your weapon, where stillness becomes your advantage. Imagine this. You're in a heated conversation. Someone throws a low blow. You feel your chest tighten, your thoughts rush, your mouth prepare for war. But instead, you breathe. You say nothing. For 5 seconds, 10, you let the feeling rise and pass. You don't pretend it's not there. You just don't let it run the show. And what happens? You reclaim the narrative. You observe instead of obey. You walk away with your dignity intact while they wonder why their chaos didn't shake you. So train the pause like a warrior sharpens his sword. Practice it in small moments. Traffic, delays, disrespect. In each, choose breath over backlash, detachment over drama, clarity over collision. Because in the end, power doesn't come from reaction. Power comes from restraint. And the man who can hold his fire without losing his heat is the man no one can break. Principle 2. Understand your emotional triggers. Have you ever snapped at someone and immediately regretted it without even knowing why? You weren't trying to be rude. You weren't looking for a fight. But suddenly, something inside you ignited. A comment that shouldn't matter did. A glance that shouldn't hurt cut deep. And afterward, you're left wondering, What the hell just happened to me? That's not weakness. That's not you being dramatic. That's a trigger, an invisible wire buried in your nervous system, wrapped around memories, pain, or patterns you never asked for. And unless you learn to uncover them, they will own you. They will hijack your reactions and leave you confused, ashamed, and disconnected from your own power. Eliot Crane didn't learn this in a book. He learned it in a boardroom. After he overreacted to a harmless critique from a junior team member, the room went quiet. The energy shifted, and the moment he walked out, he knew the anger hadn't come from that meeting. It came from something older, something unresolved. Maybe it was being shut down as a kid. Maybe it was years of not being heard. He didn't know exactly, but he knew the emotion was louder than the moment deserved. This is what the Stoics understood better than most. Epictetus reminded us, first, learn the meaning of what you say, and then speak. In other words, know where your reaction is truly coming from, before you let it speak for you. Most people don't take that pause. They live on autopilot. They think they're reacting to now, but they're actually reacting to childhood wounds, past betrayals, unmet needs they never admitted out loud. The insult wasn't about the words. It was about what those words touched inside them. But here's the key. Triggers are not excuses. They are invitations. When you feel that surge of heat in your chest, that rush of defensiveness, that sudden shutdown, don't just explain it away. Study it. Sit with it. Ask, what story is this emotion trying to protect? Because until you bring the unconscious into the light, it will keep running the show from the shadows. The path to emotional control doesn't begin with willpower. It begins with self-awareness. The kind that watches your reactions like a scientist. Curious, not judgmental. When Eliot started journaling every time he got reactive, patterns began to emerge. Certain words, certain tones, certain situations. And once he could see them, they started to lose their power. That's the breakthrough. Triggers that are seen can be softened. And once softened, they can be rewired. It's not easy. It's not overnight. But every moment you choose to look inward instead of lashing outward is a moment you reclaim your calm. So next time something gets under your skin, stop. Don't fight it. Don't flee from it. Just ask, is this really about now, or is this something older? The man who knows his own triggers isn't weak. He's dangerous. Because while others are still reacting blindly, he's already chosen his next move. With clarity, not confusion. That's emotional freedom. That's power. And it begins with one simple habit. Look inward before you explode outward. Once you see your triggers, the next step is to change the story they're attached to. Because reaction often begins with a narrative we never questioned. Principle 3. Reclaim your narrative. You've been lied to your whole life. Told that what happens to you is who you are. That failure defines you. That rejection means you're not enough. That if someone walks away, you must be broken. You've been conditioned to believe that your worth is shaped by circumstances. But here's the truth. They lied, and you believed them, until now, because you are not the pain they gave you. You are not the opinion someone once shouted at you in anger. You are not the promotion you didn't get. You are not the one who's too sensitive, or too intense, or too much. You are the narrator of your story, not the victim of it. But if you don't seize that role, someone else will keep writing it for you. And they'll make you the character that always reacts, always doot, always breaks. Eliot Crane used to live that way. After his company fell apart, he told himself it was because he wasn't enough. He let one investor's disapproval turn into a permanent identity. You're unstable under pressure. Those words weren't just feedback. They became his internal dialogue. He repeated them in silence. He accepted them as fact. He built a narrative out of a wound, and that wound became his lens. We all do it. Something painful happens, and instead of healing, we make it mean something about us. We give the moment a title, a label, a script. She left, so I must be unlovable. They laughed, so I must be a joke. They passed me up, so I must not matter. One moment writes the rest of the page, and before long, we're reacting not to reality, but to the story we've internalized. The Stoics were clear on this. Seneca wrote, "A man is as wretched as he has convinced himself that he is." That means the mind isn't just where suffering happens. It's where suffering begins. And if you want to stop being at the mercy of every trigger, every insult, every rejection, you must change the meaning, not the memory. The meaning. So here's your task. The next time something triggers you, pause. Ask yourself, what story am I telling myself about this? Is it that you're not enough? That they're out to get you? That you always mess things up? Stop. That's not truth. That's trauma writing your script. Reclaim your voice. Rewrite your meaning. Eliot did. He no longer calls that investor's comment a failure. He calls it the day I realized I needed to lead differently. Some event, new narrative. And that small shift changed everything, because the man who rewrites his own story becomes untouchable. He no longer reacts to the world's version of him. He creates his own. And that man, the one who pauses, reflects, reframes, isn't ruled by emotion. He's anchored in authorship. Your past may explain your pain, but it doesn't get to define your power. Take back the pen, own the plot, rewrite the reaction, and never let a single moment decide the story again, because now it's your turn. What's one old story you've been carrying that no longer serves you? Share a word or phrase in the comments, not to reopen the wound, but to take the first step in writing something new. Principle 4, protect your stillness at all costs. No one tells you this, but your peace will be tested more than your intelligence, more than your strength, more than your willpower. Because in this world, peace is a threat to people who thrive on chaos, to systems that profit from your anxiety, to manipulators who only win when you react. And if you don't protect it, ruthlessly, intentionally, unapologetically, someone else will claim it. They'll hijack your headspace. They'll plant themselves in your thoughts. And they'll live there rent-free, stirring you up every time their name gets mentioned, every time their face shows up, every time your ego whispers, you should say something back. And so, Eliot Crane didn't lose his company because he wasn't smart enough. He lost it because he didn't know how to protect his inner stillness. After a high-pressure disagreement with a partner, he spiraled, obsessing over the last word, checking his phone every hour, replaying conversations in his head. It wasn't the conflict that broke him. It was the fact that it kept echoing inside him, long after it ended. That's the danger, not the drama itself, but how long you let it live inside you. The Stoics knew that true power isn't found in controlling people. It's found in mastering the space they don't get access to. Your mind, your thoughts, your stillness. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul. But that retreat is fragile. It must be guarded like a fortress. Because here's what they won't teach you in school. Peace is a skill. It's not a mood. It's not a byproduct of success. It's not something you stumble into after a long vacation. Peace is something you train for, like a muscle. You learn to walk away instead of escalating. You learn to shut off the news when it poisons your focus. You learn to say no to conversations that feel like traps, not dialogues. And most importantly, you learn to ignore the bait, because that's what most of modern life is. Bait, notifications, arguments, performative outrage, endless comparisons. You think it's all urgent. You think it all demands a reaction, but it doesn't. Not everything deserves your energy. Not everyone deserves your explanation. Your calm is not a gift for them to play with. So build your rituals, create boundaries, cut access where needed. Eliot now has a rule. No phone for the first hour of the morning. That hour belongs to silence, to breath, to intention. Because if the world gets to set your tone first thing, it owns your day. But when you protect your stillness, you walk into life anchored, not scattered. Intentional, not impulsive. And here's the truth. The man who protects his peace will always confuse the man who doesn't. He won't understand why you didn't respond, why you didn't lash back, why you're smiling when he expected you to break. But you'll know. You'll know your silence isn't weakness. It's strategy. So guard it, relentlessly, because stillness isn't just survival. It's your silent form of power. And no one can weaponize what you refuse to let inside. Principle 5. Withdraw without wounding. What if I told you that walking away could be the most powerful move you'll ever make? And the quietest? That you could leave without burning bridges, without shouting your worth, without needing them to understand why? Most men don't believe that. They think silence is surrender, that not defending yourself means you've lost. But that's not true, not even close. Eliot Crane once believed that too, that every slight needed a response, that every challenge was an invitation to prove something, until the night he got into a verbal fight with someone he once trusted. It escalated fast. Words were exchanged that couldn't be taken back. And when it was over, nothing was settled. The relationship was fractured, and Eliot stood there, breathing hard, realizing something brutal. He had won the argument, but lost the war. His reaction didn't protect his dignity. It exposed his need to be right. The Stoics would call that a failure of discipline, not character. Because they knew, true strength isn't in domination, it's in discernment. Epictetus wrote, "Do not return abuse with abuse." He wasn't telling you to be passive. He was telling you to be precise, to act only when action builds, not when it destroys. Sometimes, silence is your sword. Leaving is your line in the sand, not because you're running, but because you know exactly where the battle ends and your peace begins. That's not weakness. That's emotional control. Think about it. You don't need to slam a door to close it. You don't need to humiliate someone to rise above them. You don't even need to be understood to be complete. Most people react because they want a verdict. You're wrong, I'm right. But the man who walks away on his own terms doesn't need validation. He already owns it. There's a phrase Eliot learned to live by: leave clean. When the situation turns toxic, when the words turn sharp, when the energy shifts from truth to ego, he doesn't escalate. He doesn't linger. He leaves clean. No guilt, no drama, just the quiet knowledge that some things are not worth bleeding for. Because here's what no one tells you. You don't need to finish every conversation. You don't need to explain your exit. You don't need to take people with you to the next chapter. Some things are meant to end mid-sentence. Some people are only there to trigger the lesson, not carry the rest of the book. Withdrawing without wounding means you protect both yourself and your legacy. It means you don't let pride write your next move. It means you choose stillness over spectacle. And that scares people. It scares the ones who want to drag you into their noise. But it also commands a different kind of respect, the kind that doesn't need applause to be real. So the next time you feel the urge to react, to prove, to finish the fight, don't. Just stand up, breathe, walk away with everything they didn't expect: grace, power, and peace. Because not every battle is worth winning, and not every reaction is worth your soul. Principle 6. Label and accept emotions. There's a reason why you feel heavy, even on calm days. Why one small comment can ruin an entire morning. Why your chest tightens before your mind even understands what's happening. It's not because you're broken. It's not because you're too emotional. It's because there are emotions in you. Unseen, unspoken, unnamed, pulling strings behind the curtain. And until you learn to name them, they will continue to run your life in silence. Eliot Crane didn't learn emotional control by pretending he didn't feel. He learned it the hard way, by pushing down his emotions until they exploded in the worst moments. One day, during a pitch meeting, he snapped, not because of the deal, not because of the pressure, but because someone used a certain tone, one that reminded him of the way his father used to speak when disappointed. In an instant, Eliot wasn't a CEO anymore. He was a boy again. Defensive, angry, small. And that's the truth. Unlabeled emotions become landmines. You don't see them until you step on them. And then it's too late. The Stoics didn't run from emotion. They studied it. Seneca wrote, "What you shun will not cease to pursue you." In other words, what you avoid doesn't go away. It grows stronger in the dark. But when you look at it, really look at it, it loses its power. Because naming is the first step to mastery. Here's how it works. Something triggers you. You feel the tension rise. Most people react from that tension. But you pose? You ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? Not in vague terms. Not, I'm upset. No, go deeper. I feel embarrassed. I feel left out. I feel threatened. These words matter, because when you give emotion a name, it stops being a shadow. It becomes a signal, a messenger. And suddenly, you're not drowning in it. You're listening to it. Acceptance is the next step. You don't push the emotion away. You don't shame yourself for feeling it. You sit with it. You breathe into it. You say, "This is what I'm feeling, and it's okay." That's not weakness. That's discipline. Because the man who can sit with discomfort without flinching is the man who can walk through fire and not burn. Eliot started doing this every night. Just 5 minutes. No journaling app. No therapy buzzwords. Just a quiet moment to name what he felt that day. Sometimes it was rage. Sometimes it was loneliness. Sometimes it was pride. And over time, those emotions stopped hijacking his reactions. He stopped snapping, stopped spiraling, started choosing. Because here's the truth. Emotions aren't the enemy, but silence about them is. You can't control what you don't understand, and you can't understand what you refuse to name. So next time the wave hits, don't drown. Pause. Name it. Accept it. And then decide how you'll respond. That moment of honesty, raw, private, unseen, is where the real strength lives. Not in the pretending, but in the choosing. And sometimes, the first choice is to simply name it. You can't master what you won't name. So, what's one emotion you've spent years avoiding, but are finally learning to face? Drop just one word in the comments. Not to fix it, not to justify it, just to own it. Quietly, powerfully, on your terms. Principle 7. Train in public. Heal in private. I once knew someone who smiled through failure so convincingly you'd think nothing ever shook him. He stood on stages, signed deals, led teams, gave advice, but behind closed doors he sat in silence with shame curled up beside him like an old friend. That man was Eliot Crane. From the outside, he looked unbreakable, stoic, sharp, in control, but the truth? He was bleeding internally, emotionally, spiritually, silently, and the greatest mistake he made wasn't the failure that knocked him down. It was thinking he had to bleed in front of everyone to prove he was honest. That vulnerability meant exposure. That strength had to be visible, but Eliot learned. Not all wounds are meant for the public stage. Some healing happens in solitude, quiet, intentional, unseen. The world tells you to be authentic, but then punishes you when you show weakness. They say, be real, but reward performance. So we fall into the trap of overexposing, oversharing, using emotional wounds as currency for connection, hoping someone will validate the pain we haven't validated ourselves. And in doing so, we lose control. Our emotions become entertainment, our healing hijacked. The Stoics never encouraged spectacle. Marcus Aurelius, even as emperor, wrote his darkest thoughts in private. His meditations weren't for the world, they were for himself. His place to process, to ground, to grieve, to realign. In the chaos of leadership, he understood, if I bleed in front of the wrong people, they won't hand me a bandage. They'll sharpen the knife. Eliot's turning point came not in a public redemption arc, but in a rented cabin in Montana, alone, offline, off-grid, no applause, no advice, just him, a journal, and the question, what am I carrying that no one sees? He didn't post about it. He didn't ask for sympathy. He just sat in the fire. He wrote, he wept, he walked, and slowly the noise faded. Clarity returned, not because life got easier, but because he remembered who he was when no one was watching. This is what it means to train in public, but heal in private. Show up strong, lead with grace, take hits without flinching, but know when to step back, know when to disappear and reset. Not because you're hiding, but because you respect your peace enough to protect it from the world's projection. You don't need to explain every emotion. You don't need to narrate every scar. Let some of your transformation be sacred. Let it be yours alone. Because the man who heals in silence builds something far stronger than image. He builds substance, depth, discipline. And when he returns, he doesn't need to say a word. His presence says it all. So if you're breaking, break privately. If you're healing, heal deliberately. And when you come back forged, quiet, centered, unshakable. That's the power of not reacting. That's the power of choosing how and where you rebuild. And when you come back, stronger, quieter, anchored, your voice changes, because the man who's healed privately no longer needs to prove himself publicly. Principle 8. Speak less. Observe more. Most people think power comes from being the loudest in the room, from having the sharpest comeback, from proving your point before someone else proves theirs. They think domination is volume, but the truth? The most commanding men rarely raise their voice. They don't rush to respond. They don't flood the room with noise. They watch. They wait. And when they speak, the room listens, not because they're loud, but because they're measured. Eliot Crane used to talk too much. Not because he wanted to dominate, but because silence made him anxious. In meetings, he filled every pause. In conflict, he defended every point. He didn't realize it, but he was bleeding power every time he opened his mouth. Because real control isn't shown in how you speak. It's shown in whether you need to. The Stoics knew this intimately. Epictetus said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." Listening is discipline, restraint, observation, and most importantly, it's strategy. Because when you observe more than you speak, you begin to see what most people miss. You notice the insecurity behind the arrogance, the hesitation beneath the confidence, the truth between the words. Most people reveal themselves if you let them talk long enough. But if you're too busy crafting your next clever response, you'll miss what actually matters. Speaking less doesn't mean being passive. It means you respond. You don't react. You calculate instead of combusting. You store energy instead of scattering it. And when you finally say something, it lands harder because it's rare, deliberate, unforced. Eliot began practicing this after a conversation that went sideways. Fast. A teammate misinterpreted his idea and started criticizing him in front of others. In the past, he would have interrupted, corrected, defended. But that day, he did something new. He stayed quiet. He watched. And when the teammate finished venting, Eliot simply said, "Let's talk about that privately. No emotion, no debate, just control." And the room shifted, not because he won, but because he didn't need to. That's the shift. You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. You don't have to correct every misconception. You don't have to speak just to be heard. The most powerful men let silence do the talking. And when they do speak, it's intentional, anchored, impactful. So practice this. In your next conflict, listen longer than feels comfortable. In your next conversation, resist the urge to fill the space. Let silence make people curious. Let them lean in. And when you do speak, make it count. The man who observes more than he reacts is a threat to anyone who depends on chaos. Because while they're trying to provoke you into noise, you're busy gathering data, understanding patterns, spotting weakness, holding the line. And when it's time to move, you won't need to explain yourself. Your silence will already have spoken. You didn't just watch this. You practiced something. Stillness, attention, self-discipline. Because every time you choose to observe instead of react, you build what the Stoics called true freedom, command over your own mind. This is the essence of emotional control, the foundation of self-mastery. From here forward, life won't stop testing you. People will push, provoke, and misunderstand. But now, you know how to pause without losing your power, how to detach without disconnecting, how to lead yourself from within. If this gave you something real, leave a comment. One word you're learning to master. And if you're walking this Stoic path too, hit subscribe. Not for noise or motivation, but for the kind of clarity and mental toughness that keeps you grounded when the world wants you reactive. This isn't about becoming untouchable. It's about becoming unshakable. Not by force, but by presence. Because the man who doesn't react is the man who cannot be moved. This is the power of not reacting. Own it, live it, and carry it with you. Quietly,